My name is Barbara Weston, and I'm 65 years old, 3 months before my grandson's wedding. My doorbell rang on a Tuesday morning. Standing on my porch was my daughter, the woman who had given up her baby boy 25 years ago and let my husband and me raise him as our own. She had cried the night she left us. She was crying now. For a moment, I honestly believed those tears were for me. I thought the hardest thing my daughter would ever do to this family was leave it. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, she slid a page across my kitchen table. It had been torn from my grandson's third grade notebook. What she wrote on that page is the reason I'm telling you this story. And what that boy did about it at a backyard dinner, in front of every relative we had, is the reason I can finally tell it with my hands steady. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This channel is where quiet people finally tell the family stories they've carried alone for years, the kind you don't share over coffee, the kind that take 25 years to earn their ending. If stories like this find you where you live, leave a comment below and subscribe. Because this story gets worse before it gets right. I taught second grade in Hartwell, Ohio for 33 years, and if that job teaches you anything, it's the difference between a child who is crying and a child who is performing crying. The woman standing on my porch was 43 years old. And she was performing. I hated myself for noticing. Her coat was expensive. Her shoes were worn down at the heels. A suitcase stood beside her with an airline tag from 2 flights ago. Mom, she said. Her voice broke at exactly the place a voice should break. Mildred, I answered. I couldn't manage anything else. 20-5 years had passed. But my body still knew her. You know how you can hear a song from high school and remember every note before you even decide whether you want to hear it? That's what seeing my daughter was like. Frank, my husband, was at the hardware store. Philip was an hour and 20 minutes away in Columbus, planning his wedding. And every instinct I had told me to close the door. But I didn't. When your child walks away from you, hope doesn't die. It just gets quiet. It moves into some back room of your heart and sits there for decades, paying no rent, waiting for a doorbell. So I stepped aside. I let her in. And I put the kettle on because that's what my hands knew how to do. Mildred sat at my kitchen table. She folded her hands. Then she smiled at me through her tears. You look wonderful, she said. How's Philip? I heard he's getting married. Then, almost as an afterthought, she asked, and Dad? Is Dad well? She asked about the wedding before she asked about her father. That was the first red flag. The second came 9 minutes later. It was wrapped in an apology. A beautiful apology. I'll give her that. She had clearly practiced it. She told me she was sober. 4 years. Sober. She had been doing wellness work. She was almost certified as a life coach. She had healed. She had changed. She had come home because making amends was part of her recovery. But I've known real remorse. Real remorse doesn't sound rehearsed. Real remorse stumbles. It forgets its lines. It stares at the table. Mildred never once looked down. She told me she'd been living in Phoenix. 20 minutes later, she mentioned her landlord in Tucson. When I asked which city she lived in, she laughed. Oh, Mom, the Southwest is all one big parking lot. I smiled. I refilled her tea. And when she went to the bathroom, I wrote one word on the grocery pad beside the phone. Tucson. 30-3 years of grading papers leaves you with habits. Frank came home at 4. He stopped in the kitchen doorway with his keys still in his hand. My husband is 67. He ran Weston Heating and Cooling for most of his life. And he has exactly one face for a customer who's lying about what broke the furnace. He wore that face all evening. But the thing that kept me awake that night wasn't her changing story. It was something else. Mildred knew about the wedding. She knew it was in September. She knew the ceremony would be in our backyard. She knew Emily's name. She knew Emily was a nurse. She knew Philip wanted little lights strung across the garden. Nobody in this family had spoken to Mildred in 9 years. She hadn't come home to apologize. She had come home briefed. And that scared me. To understand why, you need to go back 25 years. Mildred was 18 when Philip was born. 18. Unmarried. Angry at everyone, especially the boy who had left for basic training and never sent her so much as a postcard. When Philip was born, Frank and I turned our sewing room into a nursery. We told her, finish school. We'll help. And we did. At first. Then the help became permanent. I handled the 2 in the morning feedings because Mildred had an interview the next morning. The interviews became weekends away. The weekends became strange. Cars outside the house. Then came cigarette smoke on the baby's blanket. Money disappeared from my purse. And sometimes, at midnight, I'd see a car idling at the curb. I didn't just sit around wringing my hands. I found a counselor. I paid the deposit. I sat Mildred down with a community college catalog. I told her I would keep the baby while she got herself steady. I had only one condition. She had to call him every Sunday. She agreed on a Tuesday. On Friday morning, I came downstairs before dawn. Mildred was standing at the door with a suitcase. The strange car was running outside. Philip was 5 months old. He was warm against my shoulder, wrapped in that yellow blanket. I asked her how she could walk away from her own baby. She didn't yell. She was calm. Almost cold. "You want him?" She looked at me. "Keep him." Then she said the sentence I would remember for the next 25 years. "But be honest with yourself, Mom. He's not a person yet." She paused. "He's a bill." Then she walked out. 6 months later, a thick envelope arrived from a law office in Dayton. My hand shook so badly I cut my finger opening it. Inside was a document called a permanent surrender of parental rights. Mildred's signature was at the bottom. Round. Tidy. The same handwriting I'd once taped to the refrigerator when she was 7 years old. There was a sticky note attached. Her handwriting again. "Don't come looking. Tell him whatever you want." That envelope felt like a funeral. Except there was no body. No flowers. No neighbors bringing casseroles. Just a living daughter who had buried herself somewhere far away. Frank and I hired our own lawyer. A few weeks after Philip's first birthday, we stood in a quiet courtroom. A judge asked if we understood the adoption was permanent. Frank answered, "Yes, sir." Then he looked at me. That's the point. So at 40 years old, I was up all night with a teething baby again. Frank was 42 and assembling a crib, with the same hands that had just paid off half our mortgage. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was diapers. Daycare. Bills. Long workdays. Teaching other people's children all day and raising our daughter's child all night. And there was gossip. Hartwell is a good town, but a good town still talks. People wondered what we'd done to make our daughter leave. So I protected her. I told people Mildred had gone west to build a career. I told them we'd offered to raise Philip so she could get on her feet. I lied. I lead for 25 years. Remember that. It matters because Philip was never a bill. He was the boy who taped a flashlight to his headboard so he could read after bedtime. The boy who came in second at the county science fair and shook the winner's hand before he even came to find us. The boy Frank taught to sweat a copper pipe. When he was 10. The boy who quietly fixed the dripping faucet next door and refused the $5 bill Mrs. Kowalski offered him. When Philip was 7, another child at school said something cruel about his mother. He came home. Did his homework, ate his dinner. Then, at bedtime, he asked me, "Did my first mom leave because of me?" I sat beside him. "No, baby. She left because there were things broken inside her long before you." He thought about that. Slowly. All the way through. Then he looked at me. "Okay." He paused. "You're the one who stayed." He patted my hand like I was the child. Then he went to sleep. I stood in that hallway for a long time. That boy is 25 now. He's a senior fraud analyst at a bank in Columbus. They pay him to catch liars in paperwork. The Lord has a sense of humor. He's engaged to Emily Carver, a pediatric nurse who laughs with her whole self. And on the second Saturday of September, they were supposed to get married under the string lights in our backyard, because Philip once told me, "The only aisle I want is the yard where Grandpa taught me to throw." 25 years we had kept that boy safe. Now we had 3 months left to keep him safe from his own mother. Mildred's first request sounded almost reasonable. That's how dangerous requests usually arrive. She didn't ask for money. She asked for a seat. "I want to see my son married," she told me. "I'm his mother." She lifted her chin. "I've changed. You of all people should want this family whole." Frank put down his coffee. Double quotes. No. Double quotes. Just one word. "You signed a paper. We raised the boy. His wedding is his." He looked directly at her. "You're not going to make it yours." Mildred cried, and this cry was better than the one on the porch. For one terrible moment, the old hope inside me woke up. What if she really had changed? What if 4 years sober were real? What if I was the cruel mother who refused to let her come home? That's the trap for people like me. You spend your whole life being responsible, and then someone learns how to hand you responsibility for their sins like a coat you're supposed to hold. But I had learned something in 65 years, so I called Philip. I told him everything. The visit. The tears. The wedding request. Phoenix. Tucson. Everything. No. Secrets. No softening. No protecting anyone. There was a long silence. The kind of silence Philip had always used when he was thinking something all the way through. Let me think, Grandma. Then he hung up. He didn't call that night, or the next day. Or the day after. Philip had never gone. 3 days without calling me. On the third day, he finally called. Set it up, Grandma. One lunch. We met at the Blue Willow Diner. Philip chose the place. It was public. Quiet. And had pie. Mildred arrived, dressed like a Sunday. When Philip stood to greet her, she went in for a hug. He offered his hand. She took it. My son, she whispered. My whole heart. Philip smiled. It was the pleasant, unreadable smile he used at work when a loan file didn't add up. Then he started asking questions. Where had she lived? Which years? What had she done? Where was her coaching certificate from? What exactly did she mean by making amends? Could she explain the steps? Mildred's answers wandered. Phoenix became Tucson. Tucson became Sedona. Dates moved around. Details changed. Philip listened. He didn't argue. He just cataloged everything. Finally, Mildred said, Your grandmother worried about telling you I was here. Then her smile disappeared. She's not your mother, sweetheart. Her voice became sweet over gravel. I'm your mother. Philip nodded. You're right. Words matter. He put down his fork. She's the one who came to my games. She signed my report cards. She sat beside me when I had pneumonia. He looked directly at Mildred. I used the word for the person who did the job. He left cash on the table. Then he kissed the top of my head. And we left. The next morning at 7, my phone lit up. Mildred. The message said, We need to talk about what you owe me. I read it twice. And something inside me changed. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Over the next week, Mildred's story changed everywhere she told it. She hadn't abandoned her baby. She had been young. Scared. Pressured. Coerced. The adoption was probably illegal. She had supposedly already spoken to an attorney. She was building a new story. And I realized something. The truth doesn't defend itself. It just stands there like a fence post while somebody paints it. So I went to the fire safe in our bedroom. Inside was the folder we'd kept for 25 years. The surrender, the adoption, decree, certified copies, and her sticky note. Don't come looking. I called an attorney in Columbus. Susan Kessler. She listened to everything. Then she said, Bring me every document. Her office looked over the river. She went through the folder page by page. Finally, she took off her glasses. Mrs. Weston, this adoption is permanent. I breathed again. But there's another problem. She explained that anyone could file a lawsuit. Even a weak one. We could still spend tens of thousands defending ourselves. And if Mildred's real weapon was the story rather than the courtroom, there was no judge who could stop her from telling it. Her weapon isn't a judge, Susan said. It's a story. That sentence stayed with me. When I got home, my sister Carol was sitting at my kitchen table. With Mildred. Carol loved family. Sometimes too much. She's your blood, Carol said. People change. I asked her, what exactly has changed? She didn't have an answer. But people like Carol don't always need one. The word blood does all their thinking for them. Then, Mildred began attending my church. 3 Sundays. In a row, she cried during exactly the right hymn. She stood outside afterward and spoke softly to anyone who would listen. She never made direct accusations. She just gave people pieces, how hard it was to come home. How some doors stay locked. So I protected her. I told people Mildred had gone west to build a career. I told them we'd offered to raise Philip so she could get on her feet. I lied. I lied for 25 years. Remember that. It matters. Because Philip was never a bill. He was the boy who taped a flashlight to his headboard so he could read after bedtime. The boy who came in second at the county science fair and shook the winner's hand before he even came to find us. The boy Frank taught to sweat a copper pipe when he was 10. The boy who quietly fixed the dripping faucet next door and refused the $5 bill Mrs. Kowalski offered him. When Philip was 7, another child at school said something cruel about his mother. He came home. Did his homework, ate his dinner, Then at bedtime he asked me, "Did my first mom leave because of me?" I sat beside him. "No, baby. She left because there were things broken inside her long before you." He thought about that slowly. All the way through then he looked at me. "Okay." He paused. "You're the one who stayed." He patted my hand like I was the child. Then he went to sleep. I stood in that hallway for a long time. That boy is 25 now. He's a senior fraud analyst at a bank in Columbus. They pay him to catch liars in paperwork. The Lord has a sense of humor. He's engaged to Emily Carver, a pediatric nurse who laughs with her whole self. And on the second Saturday of September, they were supposed to get married under the string lights in our backyard. Because Philip once told me, "The only aisle I want is the yard where Grandpa taught me to throw." 25 years we had kept that boy safe. Now we had 3 months left to keep him safe from his own mother. Mildred's first request sounded almost reasonable. That's how dangerous requests usually arrive. She didn't ask for money, she asked for a seat. "I want to see my son married," she told me. "I'm his mother." She lifted her chin. "I've changed. You of all people should want this family whole." Frank put down his coffee. "No, just one word. You signed a paper. We raised the boy. His wedding is his." He looked directly at her. "You're not going to make it yours." Mildred cried, and this cry was better than the one on the porch. For one terrible moment, the old hope inside me woke up. What if she really had changed? What if 4 years sober were real? What if I was the cruel mother who refused to let her come home? That's the trap for people like me. You spend your whole life being responsible, and then someone learns how to hand you responsibility for their sins like a coat you're supposed to hold. But I had learned something in 65 years, so I called Philip. I told him everything, the visit, the tears, the wedding request, Phoenix, Tucson, everything, no. Secrets, no softening, no protecting anyone. There was a long silence. The kind of silence Philip had always used when he was thinking something all the way through. "Let me think, Grandma." Then he hung up. He didn't call that night, or the next day, or the day after. Philip had never gone 3 days without calling me. On the third day, he finally called. "Set it up, Grandma. One lunch." We met at the Blue Willow Diner. Philip chose the place. It was public. Quiet. And had pie. Mildred arrived, dressed like a Sunday. When Philip stood to greet her. She went in for a hug. He offered his hand. She took it. "My son," she whispered. "My whole heart." Philip smiled. It was the pleasant, unreadable smile he used at work when a loan file didn't add up. Then he started asking questions. Where had she lived? Which years? What had she done? Where was her coaching certificate from? What exactly did she mean by making amends? Could she explain the steps? Mildred's answers wandered. Phoenix became how a mother can lose a child. Soon people were calling Philip her stolen boy. Then came Facebook. Mildred posted an essay. "To the woman who kept my baby." She didn't use my name. She didn't need to. Hartwell had 9,000 people. A town that size can solve a blind item before lunch. The post spread. Strangers called us monsters. Someone I had taught beside for 11 years. Left a praying hands emoji. That hurt more than I expected. Then Mildred started mentioning a podcast. Broken Cradles, a show about family separation. She said they wanted her story. She said the host had contacted her personally. She said it casually, like a loaded gun on a kitchen table. Then came the page. One Saturday, Mildred asked to see Philip's baby things. I should have said no, but I didn't. I brought out the cedar box, the hospital bracelet, the yellow blanket. Old school notebooks. She held the blanket against her face. For 10 minutes, her tears looked real. Maybe some of them were. Then she put the blanket down. Her expression changed. Let's be adults about this. She opened Philip's 3rd grade notebook. Tore out a page, right along his pencil practice. Then she turned it over, took a pen from her purse, and wrote one number, $85,000. She slid the page across the table. Call it back pay. I stared at the number. You got a son out of me, 25 years of him. You think that's free? She kept talking. There was a lawsuit. There was an attorney. There was the podcast. And then she looked at me. The wedding is in September, right? I didn't answer. It would be a shame if the truth showed up in a sundress. My voice came out old. How can you put a price on your own child? She smiled. Every mother has a price. I'm just honest about mine. She left the page on my table. It looked like a burn mark. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, I went into the kitchen. I reached for an old flour tin. Inside was a blue bank passbook. Nobody knew about that account. Not even Frank. I'd opened it after the adoption. Every month, I deposited whatever I could. Birthday money, tutoring money. Small amounts. I told myself it was for the day Mildred came home ready to be a person. Rehab. A security deposit. Community college. A fresh start. After 24 years, there was just under $17,000. I stared at that balance. Then I looked at the $85,000 demand. For 24 years, I'd been saving money to help my daughter. She had spent one summer trying to turn that love into a price. At 3 in the morning, I woke Frank. I put both papers on the quilt. The passbook. The $85,000 demand. And I told him everything. He looked at the papers, then at me. Finally, he took my hand. We are not buying back our family. That sentence decided everything. 11 days later, a certified letter arrived. Cream-colored paper. Legal language. Demand for $85,000. It accused us of coercion and fraud. It threatened public action. Frank read it beside the mailbox. Then he stopped. He rubbed his left arm. Barb. His voice was strangely calm. I think something's off. We spent the night at the hospital. Thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack. The doctor called it a warning. Stress. A warning shot. We took Frank home the next morning. I made a terrible decision. I decided not to tell Philip. Not yet. He was 10 weeks from his wedding. He was happy. And I'd spent 25 years protecting him. I thought I was protecting him again. I was wrong. After I stopped answering Mildred's calls, she started texting. The messages became more aggressive. The first of the month, Mom, or this stops being polite. Then 85 isn't a request. It's a discount. Then pay by the first, or I tell my story at the wedding. Emily's family too. Try me. I saved every message. Screenshots. Dates. Times. Everything. Then one night came a different message. Do you still have the yellow blanket? I stared at it for 20 minutes. Hope tried to crawl back out of that old room in my heart. Then the next morning she was demanding money again, and I understood. The softness was part of the strategy. Then Mildred contacted Emily. She sent my grandson's fiancé a message. There are things about this family you deserve to know before you marry into it. Emily read it twice. Then she handed her phone to Philip. He drove to our house. He came through the kitchen door. And the look on his face wasn't anger. It was inventory. He had already spoken to Carol. Now he stood in front of me. Grandma. I opened the drawer. The notebook page. The threats. The legal letter. Everything. Philip. Read it all. Then he looked at Frank's hospital discharge papers. His eyes filled. You raised me. I nodded. He looked at me. You don't get to protect me from my own mother anymore. I started explaining. He stopped me. That job is finished. Then he held out his hand. Your phone. I gave it to him. He sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Mildred had written $85,000. He read every message. Slowly. Then he copied several of them onto a legal pad. Grandma, what is this? I said. Your mother being your mother. He shook his head. No. It's a demand for money tied to a threat. He looked up. That's extortion. Philip did what he was trained to do. He verified everything. First, the legal letter. He ignored the phone number printed on it. Instead, he found the real number for Harmon and Price. He called. Speakerphone on. A receptionist answered. Then a partner came on the line. Philip asked whether Mildred was a client. There was silence. Then the attorney said no. They had never represented her. She had received one free consultation. That's all. Philip looked at the letter. There's no lawsuit. He examined the formatting. The bar number is fake. He checked the letterhead. She downloaded a template. Then he found someone else, a woman named Ruth Delgado. 7 years earlier, Ruth's son had ended an engagement with Mildred. Ruth had received letters $2,30,000. Threats. The same phrase. Back pay. The same escalating deadlines. The same promise to tell the story. To employers and churches. Ruth sent us copies. And suddenly everything became clear. This wasn't a broken woman coming home to reclaim her son. This was a script she'd tested before. and we were simply the next family on the list. But I still saw my daughter one more time. In a grocery store parking lot. There was no audience. No church. No camera. No performance. She looked tired. I was 18, Mom. She stared past me. This town decided who I was before I even finished being a kid. You let them think you were the saint, her voice cracked. Do you know what it's like seeing pictures of him every year? Every year he got taller. It proved I was exactly what everybody said I was. She looked at me. So fine. If I'm the monster eats. For 1 second, I saw the girl with the bangs. The girl who had once slept beneath that yellow blanket. The girl I had failed to save from herself. Grief doesn't excuse what she did, but there was still a person inside the con. And both things could be true. Then she put the mask back on. 85,000, or I stand up at that wedding. She walked away, and I knew. Hope and evidence could no longer share. The same house. The family split 3 ways. Carol wanted us to pay. Whatever makes her go away. Frank wanted legal protection. Philip wanted something different. He sat quietly at our kitchen table. Then he said, "Invite her." Carol stared at him. Philip continued. "She's been demanding a seat at this family's table all summer. Give her one. Let her say everything." Then he looked at me. "And I'll answer. Not with a speech, with paper." He wanted the whole family there. No secrets. The adoption papers. The sticky note. The texts. Frank's hospital. Records. Everything. No more cover stories, Grandma. That was the hardest part, because I'd spent 25 years protecting Mildred's reputation. Now I had to stop. On Tuesday, I sat with Pastor Neil. And for the first time in 25 years, I told the truth. The suitcase, the car outside, the surrender papers, the note. The money we'd spent trying to help her, and the lie I'd told the town. I wasn't protecting Mildred, I finally admitted. I was protecting the version of myself that didn't fail her. Pastor Neil listened. Then he said, "The truth arrives like a plow. Hard on the ground. But it's the only thing that prepares the field." Wednesday, I told Carol. She cried. Then she said, "I wasn't defending her. I was defending a story." By Thursday, Hartwell had 2 stories, and I didn't care anymore. There was nothing left for Mildred to expose. The only thing left was the truth. The invitation went out. Family dinner. Our backyard. Sunday. At 5, everyone would be there. Mildred was welcome. Her reply came within 1 minute. Finally. Then, have my check ready. A woman who claimed she wanted her family back had answered a dinner invitation with a payment instruction. Still. Some stubborn part of me noticed something else. She was coming. My daughter would sit at my table again. Hope is not smart. It's just adorable. Sunday arrived. The backyard was golden. Frank had already hung the wedding lights. More than 24 relatives came. Emily and her parents. Carol. Frank single quotes. S brothers. Cousins. Pastor Neil. Philip sat beside me. A leather folder rested beneath his chair. Mildred arrived at 5:40. Perfect timing. Pale. Flower print dress. Soft expression. Camera ready. She hugged relatives. Then waited. She waited until dessert. Until the coffee was poured. Then she stood. Dinged her glass. And began. She told the story. 18. Scared. Papers. Locked doors. A mother who had never stopped reaching for her child. Then she put her hand against her chest. "I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking this family to do what's right." Before my daughter could finish, Philip stood. "Since we're doing family business at dinner," he opened the leather folder. "I have a few things too." Then he began reading. August 1st. The first of the month, Mom, or this stops being polite. August 6th. 85 isn't a request. It's a discount. August 11th. Pay by the 1st, or I tell my story at the wedding. The table went silent. Mildred shifted. "Those are out of context." Philip nodded. "You're right. Context matters." Then he held up the legal letter. "This says you hired Harmon and Price." "I called them. They've never represented you." He placed the letter on the table. "This bar number doesn't exist. You don't have a lawyer. You have a template." Mildred's face changed. Then Philip pulled out Ruth's letters. 7 years ago, you did this to another family. $30,000, threats. Back pay. Same pattern. He placed the papers beside the texts. "She sent us copies. She asked me to tell you one thing. It never ends if you pay." No one moved. Philip wasn't finished. He told the family about the money we'd spent helping. Mildred. Rehab. Gas. Security deposits. Birthday money. Years of open doors. Then he looked at Mildred. The story you told tonight was about a scared girl who never stopped reaching for a locked door. He shook his head. The door was never locked. It was propped open with money. And you were the only one who kept walking away. Mildred's eyes moved toward me. For one heartbeat, I saw the girl from 25 years ago. Then she straightened. Mom, her voice became soft. Look at me. I'm your daughter, your only child. If you let them do this to me, I'll disappear. You'll die wondering. Choose. Then Philip spoke quietly. There's a detective in town, Detective Alvarez. I showed him the messages. He said the complaint would have to come from you. He looked at me. Nobody should make this decision for you. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. I stood. My knees hurt, but my hands didn't shake. I looked at my son. Then I looked at my daughter. Mildred. The night you left, you told me a baby was a bill I'd pay forever. You were wrong. He was never the bill. I paused. You were. Her mouth opened. I continued. There's a bank account you never knew about. I opened it the year the adoption became final. Every spare dollar I had went into it. 24 years. It was for you. For the day you came home ready to be a person. You never had to threaten anyone. You only had to come home honest. I took a breath. I closed that account this morning. Tomorrow morning I'll be at the police station, and I'll sign the complaint. Mildred stared at me. Then she whispered, You'll lose me forever. I looked at her. Sweetheart, I've been losing you for 25 years. At least now I'll know where the grave is. You should go. She stood. No screaming. No broken glass. She walked through the string lights. At the gate. She stopped. She didn't turn around. Then she said, Tell him the yellow blanket was mine first. And she left. That was the truest thing she said all summer. Monday morning. Frank drove me to the police station. Detective Alvarez walked me through the complaint. Then he slid the paper toward me. I thought about the last document that had mattered this much. Mildred's signature. 25 years. Earlier, giving up her baby. And now my signature. Keeping him safe. I signed. My hand was steady. Mildred eventually pleaded guilty to attempted extortion. She received probation and a no-contact order. Broken Cradles never aired her story. The town slowly returned. The casseroles came back. The pastor's wife looked me in the eye again. Some people never change their minds. That's okay. You can't fix every story people choose to believe. Carol came over with a pie. She apologized, then stayed to wash dishes. In our family, that's a peace treaty. Frank recovered. And I cried exactly once. The day the no-contact order arrived. Not for the woman at the garden gate, for the girl with the bangs. The girl I finally had to bury while she was still alive. Nobody tells you that you're allowed to grieve someone who's still living. I'm telling you, you are. 2 weeks later, Philip married Emily. Same backyard. Same maple tree. Same string lights. But it was a different garden. Not one chair was empty. Because we hadn't set a chair for absence. We set the table for the people who showed up. That's the secret. It took me 65 years to understand it. Late that night, Philip came across the yard. He was still wearing his wedding suit. He held out his hand. We danced beneath the lights. Frank had hung. Then Philip leaned down. His forehead touched mine. And he whispered, You're the one who stayed. The exact same words he'd spoken when he was 7. Same boy, different man. And I cried. As for the $17,000, it didn't stay closed for long. That money had spent 24 years waiting for someone. So we gave it someone. We created a small fund through First Methodist for grandparents raising grandchildren who needed help with school supplies. Shoes formula. And everyday necessities. Carol handles the paperwork. Frank calls it the Stay Fund. And I cry a little every time I hear that name. That's okay. Some bills you pay forever. Gladly. Because here's what I learned. Family is not a debt that blood collects. Family is something built every ordinary morning by whoever stays. You are allowed to grieve a living person. You are allowed to close a door while love is still in your hands. And you are allowed to keep your whole heart for the people who never once sent you a bill. That's my story. 2. Signatures. 1 blue passbook. 20-5 years. If you're the person who stayed for a grandchild. Sister dot a neighbor dot or someone who simply needed one person not to walk away. Then somewhere to someone. You may be the whole family dot. Tell me your story in the comments. Dot share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Dot and subscribe to Calm Drama Stories. Dot thank you for sitting at my table. I'll see you in the next story.